Hello, it's April 16th, 2024. Thank you for joining me for another video, and thank you for watching. Today is a follow-up to vlog number 15, just a few days ago, in which I asked the question, is Jesus just a teacher of the Word? And the Word being what we understand now in Christian religion across the great expanse, as I said, is the Bible. Is the Bible the Word, and is that all that we have of God? I'm going to give some clarification in the area in which I talked about we can't just go to the scriptures, the compilation of scriptures in the Bible, which gives us what we have come to know as the basic instructions before leaving earth. Just a nice little phrase that we talk about, and how we have said in all of our different Christian processes and our formulas and our prescriptions, we say that we are getting our commands and our directions from the scriptures. And whether we believe completely or just subconsciously that the Bible is all the words we have, it represents all of God to us now. And when we talk about God speaking to us, it is really only the scriptures. And we say to ourselves, whether it be completely in 100% overt belief or our subconscious understandings, that God isn't going to say anything to us but what He has said in the past. He will only draw our attention to His teachings. He will only draw our attention to the things that He did in the past. And what that does for us is it puts us into a religious framework where we talk about absolutes, and every application and every life situation must then fit into those absolutes and that framework. And instead of going to God, we go to that framework and those absolutes, those basic instructions before leaving earth. And we say, okay, what do I do in this specific situation? How do I handle this? It only becomes filtered through, well, this was Jesus's teaching at this point in time, and it seems to apply to my situation, and as long as I generally apply it, then I'm following Christ, and I'm following God's directions. So what am I talking about here? What examples am I going to give when I say we must be disciples, not biblical Christians who just get our principles and we create our outlines and we have our umbrella of principles and doctrines and beliefs and those practices that we say are obedient to God. And then within that umbrella and in that framework, the rest is for us to just use wisdom to figure out how this is how we apply this, or we ask around to other Christians or whatever, and we say, okay, this is what I'm going to do in life because it fits with this principle. It fits with some Bible verses that say, or some teachings that Jesus said, that this is generally how we're supposed to live and the mindset that we're supposed to live. So we will then, unbeknownst to us most of the time, match a principle with our actual life situation. Well, this is what's happening in my life, and this is kind of how the world works, and I got to go with that, plus I got to bring in a principle of God, and what we do is we mix it together. And we say, I really got to stay within the realities of my situation and how the world works, but I'm going to bring this in, one of Christ's teachings, and say, okay, now this is how I'm going to handle it according to the world's ways most of the way, but I'm going to do it with a biblical mindset, or with a Christ-like attitude, or this command covers this. So hopefully you understand what I'm talking about as I'm just opening up this conversation today. So let me give you some more specifics. As a disciple who listens to Christ, who is the Word, I have either outright said or have hinted at the fact that we cannot expect every teaching, every direction that Christ gives us as he leads us through life, and he has a will and a plan and a purpose for us, for me, for you, for our spouses, for our kids, for our friends. Anyone that would be following is supposed to be following Christ the shepherd, and he is leading them as king of his kingdom as well, if we want to think about it that way, which I have said before. When we listen to his directions, those directions he gives us that are specific to us in this day and age, in the circumstances that he puts us in, those circumstances that he will lead us to his will and to his plan for us, and what we must be obedient to that, as he is our Lord and King, and he tells us where to go and what to do. And when he gives us those directions, the first thing that we will want to do, especially if we have grown up as Christians, or we have heard the basic instructions, the basic rules that Christian religion follows, and that framework and that pattern that I've talked about, is that Christ will give us instructions that I can tell you from my testimony and what he has done for me. I have had to take those instructions from him, knowing that I'm hearing from him, and then say, well, what you're telling me to do doesn't quite match that general principle, or the things that Christians have formed into this is how we live and this is what we do as followers of Christ. And I made the connection to Israel, the religious leaders, in the previous video, where I said Jesus was talking to them. He was doing things that they looked at, and they evaluated his words and his actions, and they said, wait a second, that doesn't match our generalities, our traditions that we have based on the scriptural principles and the laws that God gave us. So in that sense, and in those circumstances, whom are we supposed to listen to? Are we supposed to go back to our traditions and our black and white broad doctrines and our principles and the things that we say, these are the general Christian ideals that we operate by? Or do we listen to Christ giving us specific directions? Well, you know the answer. We're supposed to be listening to Christ because he knows our circumstances. He is putting us in those circumstances, and he is sanctifying us. He may be molding and shaping us in a certain way, and he will have to take things away from us, add things, direct things, and teach us why he's doing it in our lives. And sometimes when something happens and he allows something and speaks, you need to stay in this. You need to get rid of this. You need whatever he would direct for us in that process. We, if we're not listening to Christ, we will take his directions and we will evaluate what he's saying to us and the circumstance he's putting us into, and we'll say, well, wait a second, that doesn't match. So let me give some examples of how when we follow Christ, he's gonna put us in these circumstances, and it'll be a test. It will be a test for us. Are we listening to him? For he is the Word. He knows what to do, how to do it, when to do it. And what he says to us is what we should be doing. So think about the standard things we do as Christians. when we talk about we must fellowship in the body. And for all of us as Christians, we learn that that means you're supposed to go to church. You're supposed to attend the church service. And that is what we have been told and what we have come to learn is fellowship. So what if Christ, I'll just say, what if Christ for one day, just one day, speaks to you and says, I want you to stop going, I don't want you to go to church today. I want you to stay with your family. I want you to be quiet and spend time only with me. I want you to go visit and fellowship with one other person, a specific person. So what happens when if Christ were to give us that direction, and instead of going to church, just for one day, we were supposed to do something else for a greater purpose. Christ has spoken that direction to us, but yet what happens, and I tell you Christians, is you're listening to this, you would say, oh, I'll certainly listen to Christ. I'll do what he says, no problem. Of course I would do what he says. It's not that easy. The indoctrination of religion will, and the fear that our Christian religion, and we've got to stick with the Bible. We've got to stick with the Bible. That's the only thing we have. It's the only foundation. We will take Christ's directions for us, and we will go, wait a second, that doesn't match. I've got this voice telling me that I need to not go to church today. And we'll go, that doesn't fit. I've been trained that whenever the doors are open, do not forsake the fellowship, do not forsake the gatherings, and I must be there, and I'm not going to listen to Christ because that doesn't make sense. Let's talk about worship. We have come to understand that worship is being in a group of people, once again, the church gathering, and singing. Our worship now is we must sing, we must be led in singing. But what if Christ tells us, he puts it on our heart, just for one day, that I want you to be quiet. I want you to go outside and sit under a tree and be quiet in my presence and worship me that way. So what will we do? We will say, oh, I have this impression that Christ is telling me to not sing, but to be still and be quiet. I'm not going to listen to that because I have been trained, and a bunch of Bible verses that go along with this traditions and these methods and these programs that we have in Christian religion say, oh, you need to be here and you need to be singing. Worship is singing. Let's talk about evangelism. We know that we're supposed to go out and make disciples. We're supposed to go out and tell others of Christ. That is a broad principle. That's a broad truth. What if, in our efforts as Christians, which are driven by ideas that we got to go, we got to tell everybody, and we create programs to do that. We create seminars, we create conferences, Christians being, all of us in our Christian religion, we create prescriptions and formulas and programs, and we create structured outings, and we schedule them, and we say today is going to be street evangelism, and this is where we're going to go, or we're going to go down to the soup kitchen, or we're going to go to here or there, or whatever the church has planned, and we'll have all sorts of lessons about how you evangelize and what you say, so it makes it easier for us and we can follow the script. What if Christ, speaking to us, says, I don't have anyone for you to speak to? What if he puts it on our heart that we are not ready to go to the people yet? What if we want to go to a specific town or place or person, but Christ puts it on our heart by strong impression via his Spirit that we are not supposed to speak to those people. We are not supposed to speak to that person. We are not supposed to go with the formulas and the programs and just start evangelizing. What if we're supposed to be trained first? What if he tells us that he's not done preparing us for a ministry work that he has for us? What if we walk into a room and our formula kicks in? I've got to try to connect with these people, and Christ tells us by impression, there's no one here that I have for you to speak to. What if he tells us to go to a certain place that we would not go? So what I'm trying to say once again is give a scenario which will be real scenarios. I'll tell you that. They will be real scenarios and places or situations in which we have got to say, Christ is saying something to me via his Spirit. He's giving me specific directions based on the circumstances that he puts me in. And we will then go, okay, as I said in the previous video, we are trained to say, only here, this is the foundation. We must test even God against our general understandings and the things that we have built based only on the words on paper. And we will say, for evangelism, we might say, oh no, we're supposed to go. If this impression I'm getting is to not go, or to not go with the church programs, or not to participate in those, I need to listen to this, because it says we're supposed to go out into all the land, and we're supposed to create disciples. So as long as I'm doing that, I'm following Christ. So I'm not going to listen to God's direction, the Word. I'm going to follow the principle, the Word inside the book, and those foundations, those programs, and the formulas, and the prescriptions. So I'm telling you, Christian, as you follow Christ, he will begin to undo all of that. And you must submit all of these understandings that you've had about the easy plug-and-play outline, formulas, prescriptions that we have built upon the Word, which we say is God, and we have to listen to him. And it won't be so easy. As I said, we are going to be just like the religious leaders, and we're going to believe that we have to test the very God who is speaking to us, and we have to submit. We have to say, doesn't match. Doesn't match. You know, I feel like God's speaking to me in this area. There's other areas. We talked about evangelism and worship and fellowship, just touching on a few things, a few areas where God has directions for us, and we will put the words and the understandings that we have above his direction for us. And it will take a lot of faith and some real struggle to begin to go, I will trust you, God. I will trust when you tell me every day as I walk with you what I'm supposed to do today. not a generality of what Christian religion says these are the things you're supposed to be doing, and as long as you do them, you're okay. The rest of it's up to you. You can do what you want. Well, that is like sheep running around doing their own thing. They're just following a rule book, so to speak. But the shepherd has no control over those sheep. Those sheep aren't submitted to the shepherd at all. Much more could be said, and more videos we will certainly talk about all this. The difference between listening to the Word and the Word that we say is the Bible. They will contrast. God's directions are specific for a circumstance and for His will and His purpose. When we say the foundations that we have on the Bible, our traditions and our doctrines and our practices, they will contrast because we're talking about broad ideas here and versus God's specific ideas. There will be times, Christian, if you follow Christ as a disciple, you will hit those moments. And I explained a few scenarios where you will have to struggle. I had to struggle with, I'm going to listen to what God tells me to do and flow in His Spirit rather than doing a general Christian biblical practice. My prayer is that this makes sense, that there is some clarification now when I have said that the Bible does not contain all of your directions. It was never meant to be. It is not God in page form, that when we need direction, we want to know what God's will is, it's all right in the book. So many Christians will tell you that, and it's not true. Christ is our shepherd. He is the Word. We follow His directions, not our generalities and our formulas and our programs and our traditions. Just like the religious leaders, we will struggle. We will be faced with that very same contrast, that very same dilemma, that we need to follow Christ. And like I said, the things that He directs us to are for our life now, His purpose. And you won't find it in the Bible all the time. It won't even match our traditions at times. As I said, hopefully you understand that. Hopefully that is some more clarification based on the last video. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.